The sky above Seoul burned orange as another alien ship passed overhead, stood on the rooftop of a destroyed building, and watched it move like a dark shadow across the clouds. 6 months had passed since Earth fell. 6 months since humanity lost everything in just 3 days. She touched the scar on her left arm, a reminder of the first battle. The Empire had come from the stars with thousands of ships. Earth's military tried to fight back, but it was useless. The alien weapons were too strong, too fast. Within 72 hours, every major city was under their control. Now they ruled Earth. Their soldiers walked through the streets in heavy armor. Their ships blocked out the sun. And their commander sat in what used to be the United Nations building, giving orders that humans had to obey or die. Climbed down from the rooftop and entered a hidden basement where her resistance group waited. There were only 12 of them left. Last month there had been 30. They were good at finding rebels. Her younger brother sat at a broken computer, trying to get it working. He was only 19 years old, too young for this war, but he was the best tech person they had. "Any news?" asked. Shook his head. "Nothing good," made another announcement. "He wants 10 million humans to join his army. If we don't give him the people, he'll destroy entire cities." The room went silent. Everyone knew what that meant. They had done it before on other planets. They would turn their weapons on Earth and burn everything until nothing remained. An older man named stepped forward. He used to be in the government before the invasion. Now he worked with trying to keep them from killing everyone. Some people called him a traitor, just thought he was afraid. "We should cooperate," said quietly. "If we give them what they want, maybe they'll leave us alone." "They'll never leave us alone," replied. Her voice was hard. "They'll take our people, our resources, everything. And when Earth has nothing left, they'll move to the next planet." "Then what do you suggest?" asked. "We can't fight them, we already tried." Had no answer. She knew he was right. The resistance was broken. They had no weapons that could hurt the ships. No army, no hope. Suddenly made a sound of surprise. "I found something," he said. Everyone gathered around his computer screen. He had been searching through old military files, things from before the invasion. Most of the records were destroyed, but he had found some hidden archives. "Look at this," said, pointing at the screen. There were wars on Earth between 2040 and 2055, big ones, but nobody talks about them anymore. It's like they were erased from history. "What kind of wars?" asked. "Secret ones, special operations, black missions," scrolled through the files. There was a military unit that did impossible things. They fought against enemies that nobody else could defeat, and they were led by one man. A name appeared on the screen, Captain Sung. Underneath it said the Old Wolf. Kept reading. He led a 12-person team. They completed over 100 missions with almost no losses. Every report says the same thing. When Captain Sung was there, they won, no matter what. "Where is he now?" someone asked. Clicked through more files. The records showed mission after mission, victory after victory. Then suddenly everything stopped. The last entry was from 15 years ago. It just said, "Status, withdrawn, location, unknown." "He disappeared," said. "But I found one more thing. A local monastery in province received government funding for years after he vanished. The payments stopped when they invaded." Felt something she hadn't felt in months. It wasn't quite hope, but it was close. "You think he's there?" "Maybe," said, "or maybe he's dead, but it's the only lead we have." Laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "You want to find a soldier from 20 years ago. Even if he's alive, he'd be an old man now. What could he possibly do against the—" Looked at the screen at the name Captain Sung. She thought about the impossible missions, the victories against terrible odds. She thought about how Earth had no warriors left, how everyone had given up. "I don't know," she said finally, "but doing nothing means we lose for sure. At least this is something." That night and packed supplies for the journey. The monastery was 3 days away on foot, through territory controlled by patrols. It was dangerous. They might not come back. Before they left, stood on the rooftop one more time and looked at the city. Fires burned in the distance. Alien ships moved through the sky. Somewhere below, people were suffering under the occupation. She thought about Captain Sung, the old wolf. Was he really at that monastery? And if he was, would he even care about Earth's war anymore? Called her name from below. It was time to go. Took one last look at Seoul, then climbed down to begin the journey. She didn't know what they would find in the mountains, but she knew one thing for certain. Earth needed warriors again, and maybe, just maybe, there was one left who remembered how to fight. The mountain path was steep and covered with loose rocks. His legs burned as she climbed higher into the clouds. Beside her, breathed heavily, his face red from the effort. They had been walking for 3 days, hiding from patrols and sleeping in caves. The monastery appeared suddenly through the morning mist. It was old, with wooden walls and a curved roof in the traditional style. Most of the buildings looked empty and damaged. No smoke came from the chimneys. No sounds of people living there. "It's abandoned," said, disappointment clear in his voice. But saw something. In the small garden behind the main building, someone was working. An old man bent over the vegetable plants, pulling weeds with steady hands. They approached carefully. The man didn't look up. He was thin, with gray hair and deep lines on his face. He wore simple monk's clothing and moved slowly, like someone who had lived in this place for many years. "Excuse me," said. "We're looking for someone, Captain Sung. They call him the Old Wolf." The old man finally looked at them. His eyes were dark and sharp, not weak like expected. He studied them for a long moment, then returned to his gardening. "That person doesn't exist anymore," he said quietly. "But you're him, aren't you?" asked. The old man pulled another weed. "I'm just a monk now. I grow vegetables and meditate. The war is over for me." Felt anger rising in her chest. She stepped forward. "The war isn't over. They invaded Earth. They killed billions of people. They're going to take 10 million more as soldiers or destroy our cities. We need help." "Then ask your government," the old man said. "Ask your military." "There is no military anymore." His voice was loud now. "Everyone is dead or captured. The resistance is broken. We have nothing left." The old man stood up slowly, brushing dirt from his hands. When he looked at, she saw something cold in his eyes, something that made her take a step back. "You want to know about Captain Sung," he said. "You want to know about the old wolf. Let me tell you a story." He walked to a stone bench and sat down, and followed. "I was Earth's best killer," he said simply. "That's what they made me. For 15 years, I led special operations teams into impossible situations. We assassinated leaders. We destroyed governments. We did things that your history books will never mention because they were too ugly, too dirty." He looked at his hands. "I killed 247 people with these hands, maybe more. I stopped counting. Some of them deserved it. Some didn't. I told myself it was for peace, for Earth's future. But really it was just murder dressed in a uniform." Started to speak, but the old man held up his hand. "When the wars ended, Earth's government didn't want soldiers like me anymore. We knew too much. We had done too many terrible things, so they buried us, erased the records, sent us away to places like this." He gestured at the monastery. "They gave me a choice, die quietly or disappear. I chose to disappear." "But Earth needs you now," said. "Earth abandoned me," Sung replied. "Earth abandoned all of us. The warriors who bled for this planet were thrown away like garbage, and now you come here asking me to fight again. For what? For people who wanted to forget I existed." Before could answer, alarms sounded in the distance. Both she and froze. They knew that sound, patrol ships. "They followed us," whispered, his face going pale. Sung stood up, his expression didn't change. "How many?" "I don't know," said. maybe one patrol unit, 8 or 9 soldiers. The old man walked into the monastery building and followed him, but he stopped them at the door. Stay inside. Don't come out no matter what you hear. But I said stay inside. Sung's voice was different now. It wasn't the voice of an old monk. It was the voice of a commander who expected to be obeyed. Through a window, watched as 8 soldiers entered the monastery grounds. They wore heavy armor and carried plasma weapons. Each one was bigger and stronger than any human. Sung walked out to meet them, empty-handed. What happened next took 90 seconds. The old man moved like water. When the first soldier raised his weapon, Sung was already behind him, using a garden tool to strike the weak point in the armor's neck joint. The soldier fell. The second soldier turned to fire, but Sung had already picked up the first one's weapon. He threw it like a spear, not at the soldier but at a wooden support beam above. The beam cracked and fell, crushing 2 soldiers at once. He rolled under plasma fire, came up with a stone from the garden, and threw it with impossible accuracy into another soldier's face visor. The alien stumbled backward off the mountain path and fell screaming into the ravine below. The remaining 4 soldiers tried to surround him, but Sung used the monastery's structure against them. He led them between narrow walls where their size became a disadvantage. He used their own weapons when they dropped them. He used the terrain, the buildings, everything around him as a weapon. When it was over, all 8 soldiers were dead or dying. Sung stood in the garden, barely breathing hard. There was no expression on his face. He looked at the bodies like someone who had seen this too many times before, and came out slowly, unable to believe what they had just witnessed. Sung looked at them, and for the first time there was emotion in his eyes, not pride or satisfaction, just something tired and sad. "You brought war to my mountain," he said quietly. "You brought it to the one place I thought it couldn't reach." He looked down at the dead soldiers, then back at and "Now you'll bring me to theirs." Sung sat in the basement with his resistance group and looked at each person carefully. They were young, brave, but untrained. They would die quickly if they fought directly. He had seen it happen too many times before. "I'll help you," he said, "but not the way you think. We won't fight their armies. We'll make Earth too expensive to hold." How asked. "First, we need my old team," Sung replied. "I can't do this alone." Pulled up the military files on his computer. "Most of your unit is listed as deceased." "Most," Sung agreed, "but not all. Find them. Find the ones who survived." It took 2 days of searching through hidden records and deleted files. He found 5 names with possible locations. 5 members of Sung's old special operations team who might still be alive. They started with Min. He was 68 years old now, running a small fishing boat on the southern coast. When Sung appeared at his dock, the old fisherman dropped his net and just stared. "I thought you were dead," Min said. "Not yet," Sung replied. "I need you for one more mission." Min looked at his boat, his quiet life. Then he looked at Sung and smiled. "Demolitions." "Demolitions. Give me 10 minutes to pack." Next was 71 years old, working as a librarian in a small town. He was blind in one eye from an old injury, but when Sung found him, he was still reading without glasses. "You know why I'm here," Sung said. Put down his book, "Sniper work." "Yes. I'm half-blind, old friend." "You only need one eye to shoot." Laughed, and it was the first time Sung had heard him laugh in 20 years. "True. When do we leave?" Finding Noah's harder. She was 69 and listed as dead in the official records, but Sung knew better. He found her in a refugee camp, disguised as a grandmother taking care of orphaned children. When he approached her tent, she already had a knife in her hand. "Still good at infiltration," Sung observed. Null lowered the knife. "Still good at finding people who don't want to be found." She looked at the children sleeping behind her. "I can't leave them." Bring them, we have safe places. She studied his face. This is the real fight, isn't it? Not like before, not for politicians. For Earth, Sung said, for everyone. Na nodded slowly, then I'm in. Bora was 65, working in an underground clinic treating people who couldn't afford real doctors. She was a medic and chemist, and when Sung explained what he needed, she immediately began making a list of supplies. Chemical compounds, medical equipment, things they won't expect, she said, her hands moving quickly. I can make weapons they've never seen before. The last one was 70 years old in a care facility. He had severe PTSD from the old wars and rarely spoke to anyone. When Sung entered his room, was staring at the wall. Sung said gently, "It's me." No response. "We have a mission, heavy weapons like the old days." His eyes focused. He looked at Sung and spoke for the first time in years. "Against the aliens." "Yes." "Then get me out of here." 5 old soldiers, broken and forgotten. But when Sung brought them together in the resistance hideout, something changed. They stood. Their eyes became sharp again. They remembered who they used to be. "We're too old for this," Min said, but he was smiling. "Age is just a number," replied, adjusting his eye patch. Sung gathered everyone in the room, both his old team and the young resistance fighters. "Listen carefully. They have better weapons and more soldiers, but they think in predictable ways. They rely on their technology. We'll use that against them." He drew a map on the wall. "We won't attack their armies. We'll attack their supply lines, their communication systems, their command centers. We'll make them afraid to patrol our streets. We'll make every day on Earth a nightmare for them." "That's terrorism," said. He had been watching from the corner. "No," Sung replied coldly. "That's war, real war, not the kind you see on screens, the kind where you use every advantage you have, no matter how small." For 2 weeks, Sung and his team trained the young resistance fighters. They taught them patience, how to watch and wait for the right moment. They taught them how to use simple tools as weapons. They taught them how to disappear in crowds and strike from nowhere. Na showed them infiltration techniques, how to move through enemy territory without being seen. Bora taught them about pressure points and chemical reactions. Min demonstrated how to make explosives from common materials. Despite his age and damaged eye, could still shoot better than anyone. He set up targets at impossible distances and hit them every time. "Distance and patience," he told the young fighters. "Those are a sniper's best friends." When he was having a good day, showed them how to use heavy weapons and plan defensive positions. When he was having a bad day, the others covered for him. Watched all of this and felt something growing inside her. It wasn't just hope anymore. It was confidence. "We're ready for our first real mission," Sung announced one morning. "They have a regional command center in. It coordinates all their operations in southern Korea. We're going to destroy it." How asked. Sung smiled, and it was not a kind smile. "We're going to make it look like an accident." The mission took 3 days of preparation. Na infiltrated the facility disguised as a cleaning worker. Min studied the building's structure and found its weak points. Bora created a chemical compound that would react with its own power systems. On the night of the attack, no shots were fired. No alarms rang. The team moved through the facility like ghosts, placing Bora's compounds in exactly the right locations. 12 minutes after they left, the building's power core overloaded. The explosion lit up the night sky. The command center collapsed into itself, and every computer system inside was destroyed. Back at the hideout, the team watched news reports of the accident. They were confused and angry, but they had no evidence of sabotage. No bodies, no traces. The commander appeared on screens across the city. His face was furious. "This was an attack," he said. "Find who did this." But he had no idea where to look. Sung watched the broadcast and felt something he hadn't felt in 20 years. Not satisfaction, not pride, just the knowledge that he was doing what he was made to do. "This is just the beginning," he told his team. "Now the real war starts." 3 more installations burned in 2 weeks. A supply depot in exploded at midnight. A communications array in simply stopped working, every component carefully sabotaged. A weapons storage facility in collapsed when its foundation was undermined. Every attack looked different. No pattern, no signature. They couldn't figure out how many attackers there were or where they would strike next. Stopped appearing on broadcasts. His soldiers patrolled in larger groups, jumpy and nervous. The occupation was becoming more expensive every day, exactly as Sung planned. Then everything changed. A new arrived in a massive warship that darkened the sky over Seoul. His name was, and he was called the War Prime. He had crushed 40 rebellions across the galaxy. When he walked through the conquered cities, other soldiers stood at attention. Studied every attack site personally. He looked at the destroyed buildings, the sabotaged equipment, the careful timing of each strike. Then he did something that surprised everyone. He smiled. "This isn't a rebellion," he announced to. "This is a small team, very skilled, very experienced. They want us to think there are hundreds of them, but there are probably less than 20. Was confused. "How do you know?" "Because I've seen this before," replied. "On other worlds. Old soldiers who know how to fight smart instead of strong. They're good. Maybe the best humans have left." He pointed to a map of the city. "They'll strike again soon, and when they do, I'll be ready." Set a trap. He announced a shipment of advanced weapons arriving at a warehouse in Seoul's industrial district. He made it obvious, easy to find. Then he placed hundreds of soldiers in hiding around the area. In the resistance hideout, saw the information and brought it to Sung. "It's a trap," Sung said immediately. "Too obvious." "But if those weapons are real," argued, "we need them. With that technology, we could actually hurt their ships." Sung studied the map for a long time. His old team gathered around him. "It's definitely a trap," agreed. "But that doesn't mean we can't spring it." Min grinned. "You thinking what I'm thinking?" "A counter-trap," Sung said. "We know it's a trap. They know we know. So we give them what they expect but not the way they expect it." The plan was complex. No would enter the warehouse district disguised as a supply worker hours before the attack. She would place Min's explosives in buildings surrounding the trap, not in the warehouse itself. Would take position 3 kilometers away, on top of the tallest building left standing. His old rifle was modified to work with power cells. Bora created smoke compounds that would confuse the sensors, and the young resistance fighters would create diversions across the city, making the split their forces. And Sung would walk directly into the trap. The attack began at sunset. Explosions rocked the industrial district, but not where expected. The buildings around his trap were collapsing, cutting off his reinforcements. His carefully positioned soldiers were suddenly isolated. Troops rushed toward the warehouse through the smoke, but Bora's compounds made their sensors useless. They couldn't tell where the attacks were coming from. 3 kilometers away began shooting. Each shot was perfect. A commander fell, then another. The aliens started taking cover, but they didn't know where the sniper was. Inside the warehouse, realized what was happening. This wasn't an attack on the weapons. It was an attack on his soldiers. He was being outmaneuvered by someone who understood warfare as well as he did. Then Sung appeared. The old man walked through the smoke like a ghost, taking down soldiers with captured weapons and improvised tactics. He moved through the industrial equipment, using the environment itself as a weapon. When soldiers chased him into a building, he collapsed the floor beneath them. When they surrounded him, he used their own grenades against them. Saw him and understood immediately. This was the leader, the one who had been causing all the problems. The War Prime was younger, stronger, and wore advanced powered armor. He charged at Sung with confidence. But Sung had fought for 50 years. He had won battles where he should have died. He understood something that didn't. Winning wasn't about being stronger. It was about making your enemy make mistakes. Sung led through the industrial district, using every piece of machinery, every structure, every shadow. When moved left, Sung collapsed a wall to his right, forcing him to change direction. When tried to use his armor's strength, Sung used speed and positioning. The battle became a deadly game of chess. Would make a move and Sung would counter it. Every time the thought he had the advantage, Sung took it away. Finally, Sung led to a building that Min had prepared earlier. The old demolitions expert had weakened every support beam, calculated every structural point. When Sung triggered the explosives, the entire building came down in a controlled collapse. In his heavy armor couldn't move fast enough. The debris buried him. Sung stood in the ruins, breathing hard. He was 73 years old and his body was screaming in pain, but he was alive. He walked to where lay trapped under rubble. This armor was cracked, his body broken, but he was still conscious. "How many of you are there?" asked, his voice weak. Sung looked down at him. "Enough." He turned to leave but spoke again. You were a good opponent, a worthy warrior." Sung paused. "So were you." Then he walked away through the smoke. The team regrouped at the edge of the district. Everyone was there except. They called his name on the radio, but there was no answer. They found him an hour later in a collapsed building, killed when he held a position so the young resistance fighters could escape. His body was surrounded by dead soldiers. He had fought to his last breath. The team stood around him in silence. Min cried quietly. Bora closed eyes gently. Na said a prayer. Sung knelt beside his old friend and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Thank you," he whispered. "Rest now." They buried that night in the mountains, next to the monastery. Sung carved his name into a stone marker with the names of all their other fallen comrades from the old wars. The next morning, they retreated from Seoul. They pulled back to defensive positions, no longer confident in their control. The news spread across Earth. The resistance had won a battle, not the war but a battle. In the hideout, asked Sung what came next. The old man looked tired, older than before. "Now we take the fight to their flagship. We end this." "That's suicide," said. "Probably," Sung agreed. "But if we don't try, they'll come back stronger. We have to hit them so hard they never want to see Earth again." He looked at his remaining team. Min, Bora, Na. All of them old, all of them tired, all of them ready. "One more mission," Sung said. "The last one." They all nodded. They knew what it meant. The final battle was coming. Was done with patience. After's defeat, the commander made his decision. If Earth wouldn't surrender, he would burn Seoul to ashes from orbit. He gave the order to prepare the flagship's weapons. The resistance had 18 hours before the bombardment began. Sung gathered everyone in the hideout one final time. His plan was simple and impossible. They would infiltrate the flagship itself and stop the attack from inside. "I'm going with you," said immediately. "No," Sung replied. "You stay here and lead the people. They'll need someone when this is over." "Then send someone else on the ship," argued. "You're too valuable to lose." Sung smiled sadly. "I'm an old man who should have died 20 years ago, but you, all the young fighters, you're Earth's future. That's valuable." Stepped forward. "I have to go. You'll need someone who can hack their systems." Sung started to refuse but cut him off. "I'm the only one who can do it. You know that's true." After a long moment, Sung nodded. "Fine, you and come with me. The rest of my team stays." Min protested. "We should all go together." "No," Sung said firmly. "I need you here for the ground operation. While we're on the ship, you'll create chaos in the city. Keep the soldiers busy so they can't interfere. Make them think the real attack is down here." Bora had been working for hours on a chemical compound. She held up a small container. This mimics biological signatures. It'll fool their sensors into thinking you're one of them, at least for a while. Na had stolen officer uniforms. I'll disguise you before you leave. They won't look too closely if you act like you belong there. The plan came together piece by piece. Sung and would take a captured transport ship up to the flagship. Nu's disguises and Bora's compound would get them inside. Once there, would hack into the weapons system and redirect the bombardment. Not stop it, Sung explained. Redirect it. Point those weapons at their own supply ships in orbit, cripple their fleet. And how do we get out? Asked. Sung didn't answer. They all knew what that meant. 6 hours before the bombardment, the old soldiers said their goodbyes. Min hugged Sung tightly. Don't make this dramatic, you old wolf. We'll see each other again. Shook his hand. It's been an honor. Bora kissed his cheek. Come back alive. Na simply nodded, her eyes wet with tears she wouldn't let fall. Then Sung and boarded the transport ship and lifted toward the stars. On the ground, Min led the resistance in coordinated attacks across Seoul. Explosions ripped through checkpoints, took position on a rooftop, and began eliminating officers from impossible distances. Bora's chemical weapons created smoke and confusion everywhere. The forces scrambled to respond, pulling soldiers away from the flagship's security. Watched from his command center, furious that Earth's rebels were attacking even as destruction approached. He didn't notice the small transport ship docking with the flagship. Inside the massive vessel, Sung moved through corridors with and close behind. The disguises worked. Soldiers saw the uniforms and Bora's compound, made the sensors register them as allies. They walked past security checkpoints without challenge. But time was running out. 10 hours until bombardment. 9 hours, 8. Found an access port and began working on the ship systems. His fingers flew across the alien technology, finding pathways through their security. It's too complex, he said after an hour. I can't redirect the weapons. The firewalls are too strong. Felt despair rising. They had come all this way for nothing. But Sung was thinking. Can you access the navigation systems, the targeting computers? Maybe said, why? Because if you can't change where they shoot, maybe you can change what they think they're shooting at. His eyes widened. He understood. He started working again with new focus. On Earth, the resistance was losing ground. Min was wounded, still fighting but bleeding badly, was running out of ammunition. They were overwhelming them with sheer numbers. Na made a decision. She grabbed weapons and headed to the front lines. I'm too old to sit in the back, she said to Bora. If this is the end, I'll meet it standing. She fought her way to a bridge that they needed to cross. Dozens of enemy soldiers tried to push past her, but she held the position with skill that came from 50 years of combat experience. Every shot counted. Every movement was precise. But there were too many. A plasma bolt hit her in the shoulder, then another in the leg. She fell but kept shooting. Min saw her go down. He triggered the explosives he had been saving, collapsing the bridge and taking out the soldiers. But the blast caught him too. He fell into the river below and didn't surface. On the flagship finally broke through the firewall. I've got it, he said. I can change the targeting data. The weapons will fire at coordinates I choose. Target the supply fleet, Sung ordered. All of it. 4 hours until bombardment. Alarms suddenly blared through the flagship. They had been discovered. Security forces were coming. How long do you need? Sung asked. 10 minutes to input the coordinates and lock the system. Then you have 10 minutes. Sung picked up weapons from fallen guards. Protect him. I'll hold them off. You can't fight them all alone, protested. Sung looked at her with those sharp, dark eyes. I've been fighting alone my whole life. Go. He walked out to meet the soldiers. What happened in those corridors would become legend. One old human man against dozens of armored warriors. Sung used every trick he had learned in 50 years of war. He turned their size against them in narrow passages. He used their weapons when they dropped them. He collapsed ceilings and created bottlenecks. They kept coming and Sung kept fighting. He was shot twice but didn't stop. He was bleeding from multiple wounds but didn't fall. Behind him, worked frantically on the computer system while guarded the door. 8 minutes passed. 9 minutes. Done, shouted. The coordinates are locked. When they fire, they'll hit their own ships. A massive figure appeared in the corridor. Himself, wearing full combat armor, came to stop them personally. Sung stood between the commander and the room where and waited. He was exhausted, wounded, barely able to stand. But he didn't move. "You've lost, human," said. "Even if you've sabotaged the bombardment, we'll fix it. We'll hunt down every rebel on your planet." "No," Sung replied quietly, "you won't." He triggered a device in his hand. It was one of Min's explosives, attached to the ship's power core. Not enough to destroy the flagship, but enough to disable it for hours. The lights went out. Emergency systems flickered on. In the darkness, Sung moved. Was stronger and had better armor, but Sung had experience and desperation. The fight was brutal and short. When the lights came back on, lay on the floor dead. Sung stood over him, barely conscious. "Come on," pulled him toward an escape pod, was already inside. They launched just as the bombardment began. The flagship's massive weapons fired, but they didn't target Seoul. They targeted the supply ships in orbit. Explosions lit up space as ship after ship was destroyed. The fleet was crippled in seconds. The escape pod crashed into a river outside Seoul. Pulled Sung out, but he was badly wounded. Called for help on the radio. Resistance fighters found them an hour later. Bora tried to treat Sung's injuries, but there were too many, too much damage. "Did we win?" Sung asked weakly. "Yes," said crying. "They are retreating. The fleet is destroyed. Earth is free." Sung smiled. "Good, that's good." He closed his eyes. But he didn't die. Bora's medical skills, combined with stolen healing technology, kept him alive. It took 3 months, but Sung recovered. When he was strong enough to walk, he returned to the monastery. Came with him, along with Bora. They were the last of the old team. They held a ceremony for the fallen. They carved names into stones, Minna, and dozens of young resistance fighters who had given their lives. Earth began to rebuild. The Galactic Council sent ambassadors, curious about the planet that had defeated the Empire. They wanted to know about Earth's military strength, their technology. Now a leader in the new government told them the truth. "We don't have advanced weapons. We don't have a huge army, but we have something they didn't understand." "What?" the ambassadors asked. "We have warriors who refuse to quit, old wolves who remember how to fight, and when you push us too far, we push back." The galaxy learned Earth's reputation. Never underestimate humans. Never assume they're beaten, because somewhere in quiet places, old warriors wait, and when their planet needs them, they walk again. At the monastery, Sung planted trees for each fallen comrade. Young people came to him, asking to learn, asking to be trained. He agreed, but with one condition. "I won't make you into killers. I'll teach you to protect your pack, because that's what wolves do. Old wolves teach young wolves how to survive the winter." And Earth, having survived its darkest winter, looked toward spring. The old wolf had walked again, and the galaxy would remember.